we are very sorry for a little bit of a delay, but we promise you it's going to be worth of your wait. It just so happened, without us agreeing on it, that today is also a little bit of a Caribbean day in the Youth Pavilion, and particularly a Barbados Day, which we are... It's for a huge Caribbean turnout, by the way, which we are starting with our amazing speaker and colleague, Selwin Hart. Selwin Hart is UN Secretary General's climate advisor, particularly focusing on just transition and climate finance. On these matters, he is his right hand. In his previous lives, he also wore a lot of hats, like being a negotiator, like focusing on multilateral finance. So for him, there are no secrets when it comes to these matters. But the most important for him and what he cherishes is engagement with youth from as many backgrounds as possible. And this is the chance that we're having here. So without further ado, I'm going to pass to you, Selwin, and you'll be held by Saad as moderator. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you very much, my friend Vlad, and I'll take the mic. And also welcome you again on behalf of the steering committee of the Children and Youth Pavilion. And other one. This one works perfectly. So again, Mr. Selwin, it's really a pleasure to have you with us today in the first day of the Children and Youth Pavilion at COP27. It's coming real. Children and youth all around the world are uniting. You're also working with His Excellency, the SG, and a lot is happening there. You're leading and pushing for climate engagement with the office. And we would love to hear from you. Young people would love to hear about what are the priorities from the office side, and also what agendas and climate issues are we focusing on, and also what do you expect from young people. So please, you have the floor.
So I thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Saad, and apologies for being late, but it's a pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon. And when I look at the faces in this audience, I see two things. I see diversity. You guys look like the world, which is a fantastic thing. And I also see hope. I also see hope. And this is what COP27 is about. This is what our fight against the climate crisis absolutely has to be about. It must be about all of us working together to ensure that we can solve this threat, this challenge to your future, as well as to the future of your children and grandchildren. The climate crisis is real. Many of you are already seeing it in your own lives, in your own regions, and in your own countries. And I'm sure you heard the amazing speech of the Secretary General yesterday. We are facing a climate catastrophe, and we're losing the war. So we need all hands on deck. All hands on deck to give us a fighting chance. That's a fighting chance to keep that 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement alive. A fighting chance to ensure that we can scale up renewable energy in a way that allows us to reduce emissions, but also provide developing countries with access to the clean energy that they desperately need to provide for the social and economic welfare of their citizens. And equally important, we also need to ensure that finance is available to help persons and communities already living on the front lines of the climate crisis, with a chance to save lives and protect livelihoods. Because one of the unfortunate consequences of the climate crisis is that those that have contributed least to the climate crisis are the ones that are bearing the hardest burden. Young people like you, young people around the world who've done nothing to cause this crisis are suffering as a result of the climate crisis. So it's a moral obligation, it's a moral imperative for all of us to ensure that adaptation, resilience, and loss and damage are just not cast aside. So my ask to you, my one ask to you, you ask what young people can do. And I'll identify three things. One, in your own lives, be climate champions. It doesn't take, you don't have to be a superstar or an influencer to take action on climate change. In your own lives, in your own communities, in your own families, in your own organizations, be advocates for climate. Secondly, hold your leaders accountable. Hold your leaders accountable, your political leaders, your business leaders, your civil society leaders, hold them accountable. And third, and I would say just as important as acting and holding your leaders accountable, you also need as young people, despite what people might say about you, get involved in decision making and policy making. Get intimately involved in your local government. Show up at hearings. Get involved in decision making in your own governments itself. Right? Become a public servant. You often don't hear anyone advocating anyone to join the civil service, but that's how policies are developed and influenced. So I encourage you to become involved in decision making at all levels. But I'm not here to lecture to you. I want to hear from you what your concerns are, and also to engage with you as equals, not to lecture to you. So thank you, Sad, and Vlad, again, thank you for having me here.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you very much for the reflections. You know, it's a good stimulating discussion that every one of us has a role, wherever space, wherever, you know, action we are doing, it can always be meaningful. And also the space of unity today is what gathers us, what unites us, and what allows these actions to be collective force of power and force of change. We'd love to, again, make it an interactive discussion and open the floor to hear from us, the children and young people, to share and reflect. So whoever has a hand, please raise, and let's maybe start with our colleague there. So maybe our friend can help pass the mic. So please, before asking the question, introduce yourself, where you are from, your organization, and yeah, feel free to ask the question.
First of all, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm Bruno Rodriguez from Argentina, from Youth for Climate Argentina, Latin American organization, part of Fridays for Future. And what I would like to ask is, what do you think about this event in terms of the potential that they have to create spaces in which young people can engage and have real influence in the decision-making processes, not just a symbolic participation, but influence in the decisions that affect our daily lives and futures?
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll take a second question and we'll answer both, if that's fine. Okay, my friend there with the green shirt.
Thank you very much. My name is Ezekiel Yanford. I'm from Liberia, West Africa.
It was quite interesting.
My question to you is, young people have been facing the issue of climate injustice. In our country, sometimes young people advocate and actions are not taken. When it comes to localizing funding for young people, what is your stand on localizing funding for young people?
I will take the two questions. First, Bruno from Argentina, and I didn't get your name or Ezekiel. Okay, so Bruno from Argentina. Fully agreed. Meaningful participation rather than just symbolic participation of young people is absolutely necessary. And I think that we need really practical ways of doing this. This is great. Activities like this are essential, but we need to get young people into the rooms where real decisions are being made. Real decisions at this COP, real decisions in countries. I used to be a negotiator for Barbados and AOSIS. The decisions or the positions that we bring to the COP are developed months and months in advance in countries, in regional groups, and then within the larger negotiating groups. We need young people involved at all these stages, not to come to a COP and be given a badge to have just access to a room, but to be involved in the intimate design of positions, to be intimately involved in the design of policies. Vlad, who is part of the Secretary General's climate team, knows, this is something that he, Archana, and all of the other members of the Youth Advisory Group have been advocating. Meaningful participation, meaningful involvement means your involvement at every single stage in the design of these policies and in these positions. In addition to having you physically present in the room to hear directly and to engage. And we also need young people being on the inside, and we also need young people on the outside who are advocating, who some might say might have extreme positions. There's nothing extreme when your life and your future is at stake, right? So we need young people to be both on the inside, and of course, we need young people to be on the outside. So I'm with you in terms of definitely with you in terms of meaningful participation, but I want us to get granular and practical about what meaningful participation means. No tokenism and youth washing should be totally rejected by all of you. Right? You deserve a seat at the table when those decisions and those policies are being formulated. Secondly, on the issue of financing youth activity, Ezekiel, I can't agree with you more. Right? And this is one of the issues. Coming to this COP, I've received so many emails and messages from young people, from LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. How can I get to the COP? How can I get my project? How can I get my idea funded and supported? And we need to do a much better job at this. Right now, the existing climate funds and the existing multilateral institutions, they fund projects that governments put on the table. We need new funding models to support youth-related activities. And I really want to work with you to find those innovative new funding modalities for young people to support your ideas, to support your initiatives, to support your participation in all of these climate-related activities. Because we don't have this... Folks of my generation, I'm sorry, we don't have all of the solutions, right? We honestly haven't done our job well. We need your ideas, we need your initiatives to solve this climate crisis.
Definitely, as you said, it's a collaborative approach with us having a role to play, and it's more of, big stakeholders having a role to play to advance us so that we can play our role better. I understand we're running into the next session schedule, but I believe it's also important to continue the conversation and hear more questions from the audience. So maybe giving the floor to the lady here.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you. And some of the points that you've mentioned, you've really hit the nail on the head by saying that we need young people in decision-making spaces, not just at the COP, but inside the negotiations. And this year we've been working, for the first time we have youth from all 5 regions of the world, 27 countries, 60 trained young negotiators who are at this COP for their national delegations negotiating on behalf of their countries. So we really need to see how can we, as the United Nations, how do we support such programs, how do we support the young people when they're coming here. We've had different levels of challenges, even though countries have had open doors. We've still had levels of challenges within the United Nations. And of course, funding, most of them from the Global South, to really find finances to bring these young people from the countries at the COP in itself is a whole different game plan. So I think this is where we're calling on support from you, and thank you for raising these points, and we'd really love to take this conversation forward from here.
Name and country and organization?
This is the Youth Negotiators Academy, and the program is known as the Climate Youth Negotiator Program. It's the initial cohort, and we're working forward for the next years as well.
And your name?
Oh, sorry, my name is Hita.
Hita, okay. Maybe we'll take a second question before giving the floor. We have the, yeah.
I have a mic. Hello, my name is Pooja Tolvawala. I'm with Youngo and Rivet and Youth Climate Collaborative. So I wanted to ask, how can the UN help us as youth set up engagement opportunities with the private sector to mobilize funds for youth-led action? Thank you.
In her hand there. Yeah, the lady in the front wearing white.
Thank you very much. I think my question is quite similar to my colleague over here. But my question is indeed, what can you from your role do to encourage heads of states to get that into that conversation with youth? In some countries this is working well, but what can you do from your role to encourage other states to do so as well?
Introductions.
Oh, sorry, I'm Tirsa Zones from We Are Tomorrow Global Partnership.
Lovely.
Yeah, right up.
Okay. Brother, go ahead.
Good day, Secretary. There's a few Caribbean islands here right now, and you're from the Caribbean. So, you know, we have someone from Dominica, Grenada, Bahamas, and myself is from Anguilla. We have a few questions based on loss and damage, and how can Caribbean youth be more represented on the stage? Because we find that during these meetings, even here at COP, there's a lack of Caribbean representation, where the Caribbean is one of the biggest affected areas with climate change. So how do the UN plan to push more Caribbean presence, and how do we help promote loss and damage as a region?
Thank you. I have a very soft spot for negotiators, and when I first joined this process, way back in the early 2000s, right, as a negotiator for Barbados, I was shocked by how underrepresented, how almost missing negotiators were from developing countries, and in particular from small and poor countries. All right, we were outmatched. That has changed over time, but we were outmatched then. And therefore, we need to be constantly having what I would call a bench, all right, of up-and-coming negotiators who understand the issues and who are there to defend the interests of the Global South, and in particular, the small, the poor, and the vulnerable countries. So this sounds like a fantastic initiative. I would love to see how we can support it. Esther, please, let's connect during the COP, because we need the voices of the South. And I'll give you one example. You see the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement? A lot of folks have owned this 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement. But it was in the bowels of AOSIS. It was in the island states. It was these countries way back in 2008 that put the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement on the table. And when we went to Copenhagen, it was only AOSIS, the LDCs, and some African countries, and a few other countries that supported the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement. We face resistance from the big and the powerful countries, both developed and developing countries. But we persisted. We were diligent. We got the science to start looking at 1.5, because way back then, no one looked at a 1.5-degree scenario. None of the IPCC reports looked at 1.5. Very few scientists were looking at 1.5. But it was the voices of the islands and the LDCs that drove this groundswell of support for 1.5. I remember even some NGOs told us that we were being unrealistic. They told us that we were being unrealistic. So we need that crop of negotiators to continue, who are bold, who are ambitious, who are fearless, who are courageous, and who will defend the interests of their people who are on the front line. So I want to, I will do, you have my promise that I will do anything to support an initiative like this that helps to build that cadre of young negotiators coming from the global south. You can tell it's something that I feel passionate about, because I remember the obstacles, the challenges that we face just to get, and now everyone 1.5, 1.5. And if we did not persist, you know, despite the challenges that we have with 1.5, if we did not persist, we would be much worse off today. So any help that I can give. On the issue of finance, yes, there are many networks of private sector entities. Many of them are showing up at this COP and pledging to net zero by 2050 and making all sort of grandiose claims, right? We need to ensure that part of what they do really is to be positive activists for climate action. There are many companies globally who are claiming to be champions of climate and champions of net zero, but are in associations that are lobbying against ambitious climate action. This afternoon, the Secretary General, he will release a report from a group of independent experts who he asked to look at the credibility of the net zero commitments of the private sector. And one of the recommendations from this report is that there be positive lobbyists for climate action, rather than claiming to be net zero, as many of them are doing, and in the back rooms and in their trade associations lobbying against climate action. I believe that part of this positive lobbying for climate action is will be to support groups like yours who are doing the right thing, who are advocating for positive change. So rest assured, we will be advocates. My office and the colleagues will be advocates to ensure that the private sector steps up in terms of supporting positively climate action and supporting the activities of young people. On the point that you made around how to get heads of state more involved, fully agree with you. And the SG Secretary General, sorry, that's our nickname for him, he has been extremely active in calling for young people to be part of the delegation of countries. Every country should have a youth delegate. Every country, before coming to the COP, should have a consultation with young people to explain the positions that they will be taking at the COP. To me, that is true transparency. That is true accountability. And I hope all of you, you join the Secretary General, you join all of us on insisting that every delegation should have a young person. Every delegation, before coming to a COP, should have a consultation with young people to explain in detail the positions that they will be taking at a COP. And this brings me to the issue of loss and damage. I believe that the voice of the Caribbean is strong. the voice of Caribbean young people. We need to raise the voice of the Caribbean young people in Caribbean countries first, across the region secondly, and also here in spaces like the COP. But at home, we need young people. We need to hear the voices of young people. And on the issue of loss and damage, I encourage all of you from the Caribbean, from the Pacific, from vulnerable regions, to be advocates for the issue of loss and damage among young people in these spaces. Because I'm sure there is no young person here, whether that person is from the United States, whether that young person is from the European Union, whether that young person is from Switzerland, who would oppose ambition on loss and damage. And we need you to convince these young people to approach their negotiators in the negotiating rooms from these countries who are not as progressive on the issues of loss and damage that you are. Right? So I would encourage you really to be advocates in this space with your colleagues who should also be advocating with their national delegations on this issue. I've spoken too long, but this has been fantastic. And please, at any time, Vlad, Sad, you know, I'm more than willing to come back with this great group.
It's very appreciated. Very, very powerful words, great support. And you have also the promise from our side as young people. We were able to unite today. We made it here. And you have our promise that we will continue our fight, our journey. And we have our expectations to continue from your side, your support, and your trust in young people. And as the head of the Secretary General Climate Team and Movement, we continue to keep pushing and, you know, expecting that together we can shape this climate youth engagement on the global level. Thank you very much for, you know, joining us in our space today in the first day of the first ever Children and Youth Pavilion. We would love to have a family photo. Now you are part of the family there together, everyone. And yeah, thank you very much.